Good afternoon, everybody out there, SEC country. Hodsizer, this is Bud Light Prediction Amongst Friends, our final episode of the season, because after this, there's not going to be anything left to predict. Brandon Walker here to my left. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing very good.
Good to see you, man.
What a big day for the SEC.
It is, and what a big day for $3 Cafe. We're already down here, Northside Drive, just miles away from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Brandon Adams, Mike Johnson going to come up after us with a live broadcast from these same two seats for SEC Country Live, and then they'll make their way down to the stadium. We'll be coming to you live all day with breaking news and storylines right before the game. But I guess a storyline right now before the game is we had a chance of some inclement weather coming in, some freezing rain. There's a little bit of that going on out there. I think a 5% chance, and that was good enough for the city of Atlanta, DeKalb County, Fulton County, Gwinnett County to close schools today, which many people know it's because of the football game. It has absolutely nothing to do with the actual weather.
I was very pleased when my kids, I have 9 kids, when my kids were let out of school.
That you know of.
It's a big day for college football. Hey, why do the kids have to go to school?
Right.
And let's try to figure out a way for them not to go tomorrow too. How about that? Because tomorrow somebody's going to be happy and somebody's going to be very sad.
Well, I tell you what, if a lot of the Georgia fans living here in Atlanta, if they find a way to walk out of here tonight with a national championship, it's going to be pretty easy to go up to mommy and daddy and say, hey, look, Dawgs won. Do I really need to go to school tomorrow? They're pretty much going to let you do whatever you want. It's going to be really.
There will be a lot of voluntary getting left at home tomorrow. There might be some empty elementary schools, some high schools, but that's putting the cart before the horse. We certainly have a huge football game to talk about.
And don't forget, we got the president coming in tonight as well. There's going to be protests lining the street. It is going to be in the ice storm, nonetheless.
Right. The weather, we talked about it. It doesn't look like it's happening. It doesn't look like it's going to come to fruition, but that was something that could affect the crowd. But talking to people around here and going down to the stadium, I don't think there is anything, president, weather, protests, I don't think there's anything keeping these two fan bases out of that building tonight.
Speaking of the fan bases, the bars and restaurants and hotels here in Atlanta, this is a blessing for them. 2 schools close within proximity. They've come in. They've made a weekend out of it. A lot of people already getting set at the bar. You got to pace yourself.
You do.
Right? You've got to pace yourself. I know it's hard because you're talking about 8 hours from now until kickoff, but you don't want to be double fisting at this point of the day.
Oh, you're talking about drinking?
Yeah.
Because I've already had 12 chicken wings. It's 12:02. I've already had.
They call that breakfast in the Walker household.
Right.
Breakfast. I mean, you did say you had 9 children. Let's talk about these fan bases. It seems to me like there's a little bit more I don't want to say excitement. I don't know what the right word is for the UGA fan base. Just the fact it's in your backyard. You don't have to spend money for a hotel. You don't have to spend money for travel. And here you are. You're already heading downtown. You're tailgating already. And then the Alabama fans, it helps that it's a little bit closer to you, but you should be used to this by now. 5 in the last 9 years.
Well, you should, but for Georgia fans, it's a perfect storm. It's in Atlanta. It's the first time you've been in a game like this in, 30 years? It's a gigantic game. It's the second season under Kirby Smart. Everything is coming just right. It is a perfect storm for Georgia fans, so you understand why they're excited. But for Alabama, I mean, you've been here 5 times in the last 9 years, but how many times have you gotten to play for a national title right here next to your campus, 2 hours away from your campus? It's a very big deal for Alabama fans, too. They don't have to go to Phoenix. They don't have to go to Pasadena. They get to play another SEC team in Atlanta for a national title.
Hodsizer, Brandon Walker, live from the $3 Cafe out on Northside Drive, just outside of downtown Atlanta. We are brought to you by Bud Light. Want to remind you, huddle up with your friends. It's some ice-cold Bud Light, the beer that's famous amongst friends on game day and all season long. Let's take a look at the injury report for this one as far as who won't be on the field tonight. You'll see some graphics here. Minkah Fitzpatrick is not on this graphic. However, he is dealing with a kidney situation. He is going to play, but anytime you're talking about organs and stuff like that internally, that's just a matter. That's going to be tough, man.
And if you made a list of the players you didn't want to have injury issues on either side, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick probably tops the list for Alabama. I don't know who would top it for. Maybe Roquan Smith would top it for Georgia. But Minkah Fitzpatrick, along with Smith, probably one of the 2 best players in this game. So you want to see both teams have as many of their number 1 guys out there as possible. I want to see this national championship decided on the field and not on the injury report, but hopefully Minkah Fitzpatrick is 100% tonight.
So 2 starters out for both sides. You got an offensive tackle there to go along with the outside linebacker for Alabama. We know about their struggles that they've had as far as keeping guys on the field at that position. I think this is something that Georgia has to find a way to exploit. We talked about it a little bit the other day. I think if you're Nick Saban and you're the defensive staff there, you have 1 or 2 choices. Either you play your guys that you've had all season long that have gotten a little bit of playing opportunity here and there,
right.
And at the end of the game, they're going to be worn down. If Georgia could do what they're supposed to do, not go 3 and out, maintain possession a little bit, and kind of wear them down as the game goes on, and maybe in the second half you're able to get a tired group of Alabama linebackers, or if Nick Saban wants to play some of these other guys, there's going to be some green guys out there that haven't had a lot of playing opportunity, and look for Coach Chaney and Georgia to maybe go after those guys.
I think that's been kind of the equalizer for Alabama this season. They came in, they were 4th in the playoff. They kind of snuck in the playoff a little bit, but the reason they weren't all the time Alabama this year was the injuries at linebacker. It just made it impossible, and whether they were trying to get by with a thin group or whether they were trying to force guys in the lineup who maybe are a little ahead of schedule, maybe shouldn't be in the lineup yet, maybe too young, too inexperienced. I don't know what we'll see tonight. I don't know if they're down to that level of having to force guys on the field, but linebacker was the big equalizer for Alabama this year. I think they would have been unquestioned, undefeated, not a problem if they didn't have that many injuries on defense this year. They got it fixed coming into the playoff, but now they're right back in the mix where is Alabama too beat up on defense to really stop Georgia?
You mentioned that Alabama snuck into the playoff. Interestingly enough, at $3 here, they're replaying the SEC championship with Auburn and Alabama. They're in the third quarter, and they just updated the Oklahoma score. And, of course, Gary Danielson, who's just such a brilliant analyst, he comes on, he says, well, look here now, Oklahoma's winning, so if they win, that means the season's over for the Crimson Tide because Ohio State's going to get in. There's the Big Ten champ. Just another example of how he really has no idea what he's talking about 90% of the time.
Well, I was going to say it feels like you're being sarcastic by calling him a great analyst, and then you just went ahead and shot that out of the water.
Every time I watch the game at 3:30, I forget how much I don't like him.
Calm down. the game was a month ago, all right?
But how does he get away with
being
wrong about everything?
He's not going to be there tonight. He's not going to be on TV tonight.
Lord. Actually, I bet he is there in some capacity.
Well, he's there somewhere. Yeah.
Hopefully he's not here at $3.
Maybe carrying water on the Alabama sideline. Anyway.
So how about the injuries? I mean, most of these are on the defensive side of Alabama, especially at linebacker. I mean, how does that affect the point score in this game? I mean, how do you think, the total's at 44.5. Actually, it's up to 45 now. Do you see this game potentially going over that number? And if it does, who does that bode well for?
No, I think it still stays low. I think it still stays low. I think both defenses, injuries are what they are, but you're talking about an SEC slugfest tonight. It's not going to be like playing a soft defense like Georgia played against Oklahoma. It's going to be two physical defense. I don't care who's there at linebacker for Alabama. They're going to figure it out, and I think it'll be a low-scoring game. It'll stay under that 44 number. That's what I'm projecting.
Well, let's talk about the quarterback play in this one. Jake Fromm, who many people expect to be, if Georgia wins this game, the most valuable player, because you look at what Alabama does against running backs, not allowing 100-yard rushers, in particular against rematches, and his assistants 11-0. We know all that. I think only 2 guys have gone north of 100 yards. With Georgia, it's a little different because you're splitting the load so many different ways, 3, 4, or 5, depending how many guys get on the field tonight. But Jake Fromm, Vegas has set the total number of passing yards for him at 184.5 tonight. If you had to take a stab under that number, and if he goes over that number, do you think that's a good sign for Georgia?
I think it would be a good sign because how he responds to this stage, how he plays against Alabama is going to go a long way. I think he's the most important player in the game for Georgia, and that goes even beyond how important your quarterback always is. Because, listen, Alabama's run defense is very good. I don't think you can stop Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, but I think Alabama's going to come closer than anybody to doing that, and that puts the onus on Jake Fromm. If he goes over 184.5 yards, Now you're talking about a Georgia team that can score points. You're talking about a Georgia team that can win a national title.
Do you think they move Fitzpatrick around a little bit, or do you think they put him on whims and make another receiver step up for Georgia, whether it's Ridley, name a guy?
You know what's weird about Fitzpatrick? No matter where he is, it seems like they're moving him around, doesn't it? Because he's always, wherever the football is, he seems to show up no matter what his assignment is. So I don't know what they're going to do with him. It does make sense to put him on whims, but Georgia has weapons outside of whims. I don't think they're as one-dimensional with their receivers as Alabama is with Ridley. So, no, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick, with the running game, he'll probably move around a lot, move up close to the line of scrimmage. I think he'll be very multiple tonight.
Let's talk about the tight ends for Georgia. Warner looks like he's not going to play. The all-world coming out of high school guy was Nauta, and Nauta really hasn't been able to, I don't want to say, get on the field, make plays, had a big drop on a tough pass, grant you, in the Rose Bowl. He's a guy who they're going to expect more out of tonight. And then Blazevich, the senior, early on in his career, was a great pass-catching tight end. You got two guys there that you can use. You know, if Fitzpatrick's out out there lined up on a wide receiver, I think you attack those linebackers with your tight ends.
Here's the thing about a game like this. It's opportunity for somebody maybe who hasn't found his spot yet. Maybe Isaac Nauta, the 5-star coming out of high school, hasn't figured it out yet, but he is going to be put in that spotlight tonight anyway. Him and Blazevich, sure, Warner's out. Sure, he's not playing, but they're going to need the tight ends. They're going to need that outlet. They're going to need somebody to throw to, and I think Nauta is a great candidate for just that random guy who has a big game tonight.
Jalen Hurts, only 1 interception on the year. He doesn't turn the ball over.
That is amazing.
Well, look, you watch the guy play, and look, there's no secret to Alabama's success, especially this year. It's run the football, don't turn the ball over, hopefully make some plays on special teams, and then the defense just, you can't run the football, you're going to have to be throwing. That's the recipe. Rinse, wash, recycle, repeat over and over and over again. So, you throw in the fact that Kirby Smart knows these guys pretty well. I think Georgia knows exactly what they have to be ready for tonight.
But I don't think Jalen Hurts can just manage the game tonight. I think he has to figure out a way to have some explosive plays. I think Jalen Hurts against Georgia's linebackers is probably the key matchup in this entire game. We talked about Alabama's linebackers, but Georgia's linebackers are probably even better. I mean, they're just as good. They're probably the best linebacker group in the country. And Jalen Hurts, when a play breaks down and he gets in the secondary or he gets outside running, that's a linebacker's job to cut that off. And if the linebackers do that and they stop him from getting 10-yard runs, 20-yard runs, then it's going to be a very, very hard time for the Alabama offense.
Jimmy Barnes says Hurts doesn't even throw the ball. How can he throw interceptions? Aha!
Aha!
You got a good point there. But when he does throw the ball, it's to Calvin Ridley.
But you're talking about 1 interception, though.
Right.
I mean, any quarterback that throws 3 or 4 times a game, you'd think he would get 1 tip. You'd think he'd do
something would go wrong.
I mean, that's still an amazing stat.
Well, I think that's because if you do throw an interception, Saban puts you in the torture chamber for 24 hours.
The pit of misery.
Yeah, the pit of misery. And it makes you think twice about, should I throw that pass or should I be a little bit more cautious? I think, err on the side of cautiousness is the safe play at Alabama.
I would be shocked if Jalen Hurts didn't make some sort of mistake tonight.
That's what everybody's saying on our Facebook Live page.
Not because he's not a good quarterback, not because he's whatever.
He's
just because Georgia's really, really good on defense. And I think that might be the most undersold thing in this entire playoff. They are really super good on defense. They're every bit Alabama's equal on defense. And Jalen Hurts, I don't know. I just feel like a mistake or an explosive play from him could decide this game.
Okay, a couple things. These comments are coming in so fast I can't get to them. But hold on. Punt return TD. I'll get to that in 1 second. I do want to mention that, it's Calvin Ridley and nobody else as far as who they're throwing the ball to. And it's amazing. Listen to this. He's 8 catches away, which would be a season high for him, by the way. 8 catches away from being the all-time leading receiver in the history of Alabama from a reception standpoint. Are any of these freshmen capable of stepping up in this big moment if George is able to lock down Calvin Ridley and keep him to 2 or 3 catches, which he's been averaging over the last 5 games?
Again, you're talking about opportunity for somebody to step up. Can Jerry Jeudy do it? Can anybody else do it? I don't know. You just asked me, can any of these freshmen do it? Well, they haven't done it yet.
Right.
And they haven't done it against inferior defenses to the one they faced tonight. However, Jalen Hurts has to figure something out. I think Ridley is a good enough player that he's probably going to get his 8 to 10 catches regardless. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to get his numbers. So who is that secondary guy that Jalen Hurts can throw to? Who is that secondary guy that can be the safety valve? I think it's Jalen Hurts' legs.
No doubt.
I think that's what the safety valve is for Alabama's offense.
And that's where Roquan Smith and the rest of that linebacker core comes by. One of the things that Georgia does so well that really I don't think gets enough attention are with those 2 senior defensive ends setting the edge. They really shut down that. If you're going to get them, you're going to have to get them up the middle, and that's where Roquan and some of those middle guys and safeties come up and tackle so well. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. I think from a preparation standpoint, both sides know what they're coming. It's just a matter of execution, not turning the football over. And I'm not trying to be cliche here, but in this matchup, you really know what's coming. I don't see many tricks up the sleeves of each one of these coaching staff.
Well, there are no secrets here.
Right.
There are no secrets. There's nothing that either team can do to say, oh, wow, we didn't anticipate that. I mean, Nick Saban knows Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart knows Nick Saban. They both know the talent. Even though they didn't play this year, it's still very familiar being in the same conference. And, heck, I mean, so many of these guys have coached together. So many of these guys have played against each other in high school. There are no secrets tonight. So when you talk about, I just think mistakes is the biggest word of this game. Will the freshman Jake Fromm make mistakes? Will Jalen Hurts Hurts make mistakes? That is the big question.
And how do you overcome those mistakes? How could you compartmentalize a mistake and be able to put it behind you and move forward? That's what the great ones do. Jake Fromm is a freshman. That's one of the hardest things to do for somebody so young at that position, but he's been able to do that all season long.
Well, he's also been really good at really kind of being mistake-free, which has been Jalen Hurts' thing through his entire career. But Jake Fromm against Oklahoma really didn't make any mistakes.
No.
I mean, he passed for 248, no interceptions. He was very, very error-free, and that's what Jalen Hurts has done for so long. So maybe you're talking about a fumble. Maybe you're talking about, if the game had changed last week or if it ended a little differently, we're talking about Sony Michel in a different light because of his fumble.
Right.
If that happens tonight, I don't think you're going to get a second chance.
So let's talk about the defenses that we saw in the respective college football semifinal games. First, I'll start with Alabama and what was a dominant performance against a Clemson team. But, hey, as great as Alabama's defense played in that game, look, Kelly Bryant, that was the worst game I've ever seen him play. It was the worst game I've ever seen him play. I'm not making excuses. They were pretty young on that side of the ball, and I think they were exposed for who they were all season long. I'm not taking anything. It sounds like I'm taking something away from him, but I was more impressed with, or I don't want to say impressed, I was shocked by how bad Clemson's offense played.
I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but I'll take something away from Kelly Bryant. I mean, he's not Baker Mayfield.
No.
He's not a quarterback that's going to beat you. He is a Jalen Hurts mold guy who's going to get his plays in the flow of the offense and not make mistakes. However, you can't really do that against Alabama's defense very much. I mean, listen, Kelly Bryant scored 14 points against Auburn, and Auburn's a good defense, but it's not like this doesn't have a history. I mean, Clemson's offense nowhere near what Oklahoma's offense is. Now, Oklahoma scored a lot of points. Clemson didn't. So what can you take from those playoff games?
What can Alabama offensively take out of what they saw Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield do against Georgia, in particular in the first half of that game?
Wow.
I mean, because they don't have a Baker Mayfield. They don't have playmakers on the outside.
The answer is not much.
Right.
Not much. They're not built the same. I mean, Oklahoma averaged, 49 points a game this year? Alabama didn't. Alabama doesn't have the horses offensively that Oklahoma has. Now, Alabama can wear you down. Alabama can score points. Alabama can do a great job, but I don't think you can compare them to what Georgia saw in that first half. And frankly, I don't even know if you would want to, because Georgia figured something out about halfway through that first half, and then allowed, 10 offensive points the rest of the game?
That was it.
So there was a toughness factor Oklahoma didn't have. They kind of folded when it got tough, and Alabama's not going to do that.
Yeah, real quick on special teams, I saw a comment, this one from Jimmy Barnes, saying that Hardman would have a punt return for a touchdown. Slow your roll. Do you know how many yards Alabama has given up on punt returns this season? I know you do because we talked about it.
I do. 5, right?
5 yards.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 yards.
Cinco.
All season long. They got the best punter in the country. They got one of the best special teams.
And we haven't even talked. Are we going to talk about special teams? Because that could come into play.
Absolutely. You're talking about field position, special teams, obviously turnovers. But let's talk about the kicking game real quick. We touched a little bit on the punting. I think both of these guys are upper echelon. One of them is the best punter in the country. You're not going to get anything in the return game. In a game of field position, you're going to see a lot of angling stuff, a lot of high fair catching stuff, and I don't know who that benefits because I think it's going to be a push in the punt game.
You say J.K. Scott's the best punter in the country. I think he's the best punter in the country in probably 5 or 10 years. I mean, I can't remember a weapon like this in the punting game. He has been that good. He's been that great for Alabama. But, kicking game, Rodrigo Blankenship has been good for Georgia. He's been very automatic. That kick he made at the end of the first half against Oklahoma, one of the biggest kicks in years.
So he's got to be playing with a lot of confidence.
Got to be. Right. He kicked a 55-yarder that they had to have in order to advance, and he kicked it. So I don't think he's walking into that building tonight nervous. I don't think any of those guys. I think special teams are the one factor of this game that might be even, but whichever team can get the best of that might have the advantage.
So let's talk about if Georgia wins, who the offensive star could be. I said earlier, Jake Fromm, a lot of people expecting him to be the MVP if Georgia win this game just because Alabama would take away the running game. Your thought would be if Georgia wins, the MVP would be whom?
I agree with you. I mean, I don't think there's any question if Georgia wins this game, Jake Fromm has to be the best player on that offense. Chubb is great. Michelle is great, but I just don't think Alabama's going to allow those guys to dictate the game. They're going to make it be put on Jake Fromm's shoulders. They're going to say, hey, freshman, beat us. And if he can do that, he is clearly, far and away, the MVP for Georgia.
You know, I think to an extent, yes, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. It's never that easy to say, well, you know, they're going to take away. I think that if you give Chubb and Swift and Michelle enough carries in this game, in particular in the second half, if you're wearing down that thin linebacker core, I think there's a potential for them to put up a lot of running yards. I really do. I look at what Clemson did, what Clemson has on their offensive line, the talent they have at running back, and it is not close to what Georgia has. It's just, it's really not. I think if Georgia wins this game, I don't think they're going to be asking Fromm to do a lot. I think you're looking at a situation where you could have co-MVPs for the two senior tailbacks from Georgia and Michelle and Chubb.
Let me counter that. Even if those guys rush for 250 yards, even if they rush for 2 touchdowns, I still think there's going to come a drive or a moment in the second half where that freshman quarterback has to do something.
Right.
He has to make a play. He has to have a moment where he says, this moment's not big enough, too big for me. I'm going to make a play. We're going to win a national title. And for that reason, I think Jake Fromm is the clear MVP offensively for Georgia tonight.
Now, for Alabama, if they win the game, their offensive star would be whom?
You know, it's easy to just say the quarterback again, but I'm going to go against that. I'm going to go Calvin Ridley. I think he is their best weapon. He is their one guy that no matter the scheme, no matter how good your defense is, he is good enough individually to get the ball down the field, to score touchdowns, to make explosive plays. I'm going to bank on him being able to do that against Georgia's pass defense. I'm going to say Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley, obviously the one guy who knows if one of those freshmen step up, and they're utilizing the passing game tonight. But I'll get back to what you said earlier with Jalen Hurts and his feet. I think there's potential for him to a lot of design run plays tonight, creative ways to get him in space, let him make plays with his feet, and also, once he has success with that, run up to the line of scrimmage, let some of those guys bite on that and take shots over the top. I mean, he's shown that he can do that. The experience that he has at that position, not being shell-shocked by the magnitude of this football game, I think it's going to bode for him well if Alabama has control of this game in the second half.
I think what's interesting is we talk about the offensive MVPs, and that's fine, but the two best players on the field are both on defense. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Roquan Smith, they might have as much say in this game as anybody. And how Jake Fromm handles Minkah Fitzpatrick, how Jalen Hurts handles Roquan Smith will really tell the tale of this game.
Now, we didn't break down the running backs because, in my opinion, I think it's a push. I think when you look at the offensive line,
you really think it's a push?
I think it's a push. I mean,
I think Georgia's got a slight advantage here.
Do you really? Now I'm throwing the offensive line in the mix as well. I'm throwing the offensive line, the skill positions as far as in the backfield. I think it's a push.
When you talk about Chubb, I mean, he's been at Georgia, since 1997? He's been there for a long time. Sony Michel, the same thing. They've been there a long time. They've waited for a moment like this. I think those two guys are just a notch above what Alabama has. And Alabama has, a bunch of five-star running backs. Damian Harris is great. I really like their running backs. I just like Georgia just a little bit more.
I think it's such an interesting story. There's a great article on ESPN this morning about this where they interviewed Kirby Smart and they interviewed Jeremy Pruitt about their relationship with players on the other team. Pruitt, of course, defensive coordinator for 2 years under Mark Rick at Georgia. That class that he came in, they're now seniors. So you got the Lorenzo Carters, the Bellamy's of the world, all those guys. And then Kirby basically has a relationship with everybody on the roster at the University of Alabama. So when we said earlier that they know what's coming, not only they know what's coming, they know the individuals to a T as far as what their tendencies are, what they're like on and off the field, and that's got to bode well from a preparation standpoint.
It would be familiar because they're in the same conference. They talk to each other. They go to media days. They do all this. But just the ties between these two schools. I mean, Kirby Smart was with Nick Saban for so long. We always said, when's Kirby Smart going to get his chance? When's he going to get his chance? How will he be? He gets his chance. Now, 2 years he's playing the master. He's playing, I don't like saying apprentice playing the teacher because I don't want to call Kirby Smart an apprentice. Mm-hmm. But he is certainly coming off the Saban tree. He's coming off all that what's the word here? All of that experience with Saban. If
you're asking me for a word, you're in trouble because you're a wordsmith.
All that experience with Saban. No, I just they were handing out jobs at the bus stop the other day. Anyway, so Kirby Smart and Nick Saban have been there. They've been through the wars together. Now they're going to war. I think that's an incredibly interesting part of this game.
From the outsiders from outside of the Southeastern Conference that are not happy with the fact that these two teams. Look, Georgia was number one for most of the season, as was Alabama. I think you can just look at it. If you watch these two teams play, they're the best two teams in the country. I'm sorry, Oklahoma. I'm sorry, Clemson. I'm sorry, Ohio State. UCF, you got your mention here on the Bud Light Prediction Show. We're going to leave it at that, but these are the two best teams. That was the goal of the committee, to make sure that the two best teams are on the field. That's what you have. The game just happens to be in Atlanta to kind of put a little extra juiciness in it.
You know what's really odd about the backlash from around the country about this All-SEC championship? It was a playoff. Right. Oklahoma had their chance. Clemson had their chance. Clemson got destroyed. Oklahoma got beat at their own game. What beef does anybody have? What beef could anybody Georgia went all the way out to Pasadena and beat the favorite, who I think was the favorite. Alabama beat the #1 team in the Sugar Bowl. I don't see how anybody has a beef. These are the two best teams, period. There can be no question.
I think people were just tired of watching it. Yeah,
I don't care.
I don't care either. They're the two best teams.
I mean, somebody come up and beat Oklahoma, Ohio State. Somebody come up and beat Alabama and do it on a consistent basis and get rid of them. And until you do that, you're going to have to watch them play for a national title because they have the best coach, they have the best players in the country.
So I'll let you make your prediction, but before I make mine, I just want to say that it's been a pleasure doing this show all season long. Alex Martin Smith has been doing the show with me via satellite Nashville. We kept track of everything. We talked about it each and every week, and thanks to the viewers for tuning in and being part of the show. Here's how I laid out the season about 2 months ago.
All right.
Honest to God, I felt that Georgia was going to lose to Auburn.
Okay.
I felt that Alabama was going to lose to Auburn. I felt that was good for Georgia because they didn't want Alabama in the SEC championship, that their best shot to get into the playoff was a rematch with an Auburn team.
Do you want me to pat you on the back for this
whole thing? The whole time I'm explaining this. I thought that obviously Kerryon Johnson being hurt was a huge influence in that game, but I did think Georgia was going to win. I thought Georgia was going to beat Oklahoma. I thought Alabama was going to beat Clemson. I thought these two teams were going to play for a national championship 2 months ago. Here they are. I said if that happened, I would take Alabama.
Right.
But here I am, caught up in the moment, going against everything that I've fought. And here's the deal. It's almost part of me feels like this whole thing, it can't end the way that I predicted. So I'm flip-flopping it here at the end. I'm going 27-21 Georgia in a game where Alabama has the ball at the end with a chance to win, but they need to get it in the end zone. Somebody makes the play on Georgia's defense, and they party here for 365 days.
So you're going with Georgia.
I'm taking Georgia, 27-21.
Going against 2 months of history, picking Alabama.
2 months of history. I just got to feel to you. We talked about the other day.
It does feel like destiny.
Happening, and it's like you almost think that it's meant to be.
I get that. And I to be honest, we did our first show about this, Thursday? It's been 5 days since then, 4 days, and I've gone back and forth. I've switched my prediction several times. But coming into the playoff, I looked at these four teams and I said, you cannot give Nick Saban a month and tell him he wasn't supposed to be here. You can't let his linebackers get healthy and expect him not to win the national title. I'm not going back against that. I like Georgia. I like them a lot. I like Roquan Smith. I think they probably have a slightly better team than Alabama. Alabama's going to win this football game. Nick Saban is not losing the national title game 2 years in a row. He's not losing to Georgia, to Kirby Smart. He's just not going to do it. I know that you're not really explaining anything, but I just can't bet against Nick Saban in a big game. I can't do it. Alabama 21, Georgia 13.
I will say this. The loser of this game has nothing to be disappointed in. You know, they've both, I don't want to say overachieved. Georgia's overachieved to an extent. I think they found out they were better than they thought they were going into the season. But with that being said, the direction of the program at Georgia, the arrow, you cannot be pointed any up. If they were to lose this game, you're talking about a motivating factor for a group of young men, and then all of a sudden the villain is Nick Saban. You know, it's always going to be beat Florida. It's always going to be beat Auburn. But you lose to Nick Saban in a national championship game, all of a sudden there's something there, obviously with the history of the two head coaches and their relationship.
The most comfortable prediction I have, the prediction I'm most confident in, this will not be the last time Georgia and Alabama play in a very important football game. As long as Kirby Smart is there, as long as Nick Saban is there. Georgia is going to be in Atlanta for the next, 5 or 6 years possibly. I really don't see anybody competing with Georgia the way Kirby Smart's recruiting, the way he's coaching, and Alabama. I mean, what can you say about them in the West? I think this is the first of a series of very, very important games and a cross-divisional rivalry that's going to spring up out of thin air.
You want to throw a score out there?
For the game tonight?
Yeah.
You didn't like the one I gave you about 5 minutes ago?
I missed it. I was thinking about what I was going to say. I tend to do that.
It happens. Alabama 21, Georgia 13. That's what I'm going with tonight. I think Georgia gets a couple field goals, scores a touchdown, but ultimately Alabama's defense too much.
Yeah, you know, the article I read this morning, ESPN, they asked their 49 writers and, college football contributors to make predictions for the game. Out of the 49 that they asked, only 7 of them picked Georgia to win straight up.
That's pretty shocking to me because it feels like Georgia has all the momentum in the world.
It's the safe bet. You know, it's the safe thing. People like you that have a reputation, they don't want to stick it out there like I do. You know what I mean? They want to take the safe bet.
Well, we'll talk about my reputation in a minute. But listen, I know it's the safe bet, but it does feel like Georgia's a team of destiny. I mean, you get here for the first time in 30 years and you happen to be playing in Atlanta. I mean, it seems like everything is going Georgia's way. But then again, when you have to climb the Nick Saban mountain to win a national title, that's a very tall mountain to climb. And I just don't see it happening twice in a row against Nick Saban.
Hugh Jason says the Alabama dynasty is over. Time for someone else to take
Even
the
if
lead.
they lose, it's not over.
Oh, no, it's far from over.
Even if they lose, I mean, Alabama's still going to be a favorite to win, to be right back here next season.
Yeah. So long as Nick Saban's calling the shots there, it doesn't matter who the coordinators are, doesn't matter who the quarterback is, doesn't matter what style of play it is. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're going to run the football. They're going to play great on special teams. They're going to out-recruit you, and they're going to out-physical you on Saturdays and Mondays sometimes.
And these fans on Facebook Live are going at it.
Well, this is what we've been
they're
working
going
at.
it.
364 days we've been building to this moment. We knew it was going to be in our backyard. Dream scenario would be Georgia, Alabama. I can't think of a better matchup for the city of Atlanta. I can't think of a better matchup for the Southeastern Conference. I know 12 of your fan bases out there would like to disagree with me, but it is what it is. I do want to remind you, we've been brought to you all season long by Bud Light. There's only one thing that fans can rally behind, and that is tailgating with some ice-cold Bud Light, and that is what I'm about to do. I'm about to get out of here. I know you're going to have another dozen wings before we go.
Well, I have a reputation to uphold.
That's right. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks to Nate, our engineer here on site. Thanks to everybody back in the studio. Don't forget, look for your Facebook Live updates all day long on SEC Country Live, as Brandon Adams, Mike Johnson will be broadcasting here live from $3 Cafe and taking their show down to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where they'll be bringing you pregame news, interviews, everything all day long to get you set for the big game, post-game coverage as well.
Hey, they'll be early today. They're going to be going at 1 o'clock here in 30 minutes.
Oh, my fault. Yeah, they will be going at 1 o'clock, typically 3, so be on the lookout for that live Facebook update. And again, thanks to the folks here at $3 Cafe. Thanks to Brandon Walker. It's been a lot of fun, brother.
It has.
And we're going to go chow on some wings and some Bud Light, guys. Well, to stay tuned. We got Brandon Adams, Mike Johnson coming up next. Thanks, guys.